Welcome to Gotta Run with Will. My name is Nicoletta Nerangis, and I'm your host for this very special episode. My guest today is Dick Traum, the founder of Achilles International. Hello, Dick.
Hi, it's really good to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here today. We're approaching the 36th year of the founding of Achilles. Can you please tell me about what that was like?
Going back 36 years ago, I had been running as an amputee and I'd been running marathons, and I thought it was a great thing, and I thought it would be nice to introduce other people to it. So we started by having a 8-week running program for people with disabilities. At the end of the program, the issue is, what do we do now? Do we have another 8-week program? Do we just stop? And the idea was, let's move it from a course to a club. And we called it Achilles. We called it the Achilles Track Club. Now, Achilles was a Greek god who had a disability. And in those days, lots of folks were setting up clubs that had Greek names, and that's how we started.
What makes it different than other clubs?
We are international, all over the world. We're throughout the United States, and we have a few things in our mission which are different from other groups. So the first thing that's very different is we believe in mainstreaming.
Yes.
And it's the idea of people with disabilities not necessarily working out only with people with disabilities, but working out with everybody else. And what this does is it increases the comfort level of people with disabilities, but it also increases the comfort level of people who are not disabled competing with the disabled. And of course, our biggest and most visible events are the marathons. So we recently had well over 200 people running in the New York City Marathon. And there's a process where these folks pass able-bodied runners, they're passed by able-bodied runners, and there's a closeness and a bonding that takes place.
Yes, and the amount of cheering, go Achilles, is just incredible.
Yes. The second is the concept of achievement, okay? And what we do is we encourage people, very few, if any, of which ever thought of doing marathons, to come out, to become involved with our sport, which is running, and eventually to complete a marathon. And what we're doing is we're, in effect, giving people an opportunity to do what most people would think would have been impossible. You know, think of a person with no legs, double amputee, running 26 miles on artificial legs. Absolutely impossible.
Yeah, it's incredible. It makes me think of Walter Reed and the start of the Freedom Team and the amazing stories that you tell. How did that begin? What was the inspiration?
This is back 2004, and there were a lot of articles being written about people coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq and having lost legs. And my feeling was, let's go to Walter Reed Army Medical Center and let's introduce our sport to these amputees. And what was beautiful is that virtually every person coming back was an athlete. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I had the great honor of going into the hospital, meeting people who were maybe 6 or 8 weeks out of Afghanistan, and introducing myself and asking an amputee, are you going to do the New York City Marathon?
Yes.
And they would look at me as if I was nuts. They would look at me like, well, maybe I was in the wrong room. And what I was really doing is I was planting a seed of achievement.
Yes.
And then we would have workouts, and they'd come out and they'd start to walk, and they would start to use crutches. And we started to focus on their using hand cycles. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, here's an amputee, and he or she gets into a hand cycle. It's like a bike, except you use your arms rather than your legs.
Yeah.
And you're out there and you're moving. And it's, holy smokes, I have a sport. And more important than that was not only did they have a sport, but they had other amputees to compete with, so that they had a sport, but they also had a group. And it was fun. One of my favorite stories talking about Walter Reed was a situation where one of our athletes is about to have maybe his 15th or 20th surgery, goes over to his medical doctor and says, "Sir, is it okay if I postpone my surgery for a week so I can do the Boston Marathon?"
This is just a very incredible and special and unique element of Achilles is the group and what people get out of that group, not only the athletes, but the guides.
The most important motivational factor in what we do is the bonding, okay?
Yeah.
People, if you watch the marathon, you'll see people out there who are doing something that's absolutely impossible, and you say, well, how the heck can you get people to do that? And the answer is the group or the micro community. A micro community could be two people, a volunteer and an athlete. It could be a group like we have in Brooklyn in your chapter coming out and working out, or it could be a larger group like the folks that are doing the New York City Marathon. And we were playing with that, and we were saying, how could you do this? And we were talking about it, and the answer was the group or the micro community. And recently, I wrote a book with David Cordani. David is the president and CEO of Cigna, and the book addressed this issue. And the group was the motivating factor that made all of these people into success stories. This is a picture, as a copy of the book. The name is The Courage to Go Forward. And if you're interested in reading about it, you can go to Amazon, you can go to Achilles International, you can go to Barnes & Noble and just order it. Well, we recently had the New York City Marathon, and to my delight, we had 35 people coming from New Zealand, which is a bit away, and they were coming to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the founding of the chapter in New Zealand. And we have 9 cities involved with different chapters. And then there was a second group, and this group was from Tokyo. And believe it or not, we have 400 visually impaired runners in our Tokyo chapter. And we had, I guess there were about 24 members of the Achilles Track Club of Tokyo coming to do the New York City Marathon.
That's incredible.
And I guess the most impressive group came from Mongolia. So we had 17 members of the Achilles Track Club of Mongolia coming, and they dressed in Mongolian fare, and people, looked and, who are these people? But imagine a person losing a leg in Mongolia and being, treated somewhat differently than they might be treated here, in the sense of, you only have one leg, you can't go back to school, or if you get out there in society, people will tease you or will ignore you. And coming from there to running a marathon.
And people cheering the whole way.
Cheering the whole way. But what's also important is when a person from Mongolia, and I'm thinking really of our president, her name is Sara, young lady, lost her leg. She her horse jumped up, tossed her. She fell down, broke her leg. It became infected. She lost her leg, and she stayed for 2 years in her home. And the family was embarrassed for her to be seen outside. And eventually, she did get over that. She joined Achilles. She's run the marathon with us, and she's our star for the chapter. And she's out there running the marathon. What happens now is that people see her differently. They see her as having a halo. You can see my halo over here.
Yes.
Okay, but she has a halo. So when people see Sara, they don't see her as some young lady with one leg, but they see her as a hero, someone who has overcome her disability. This invigorates her to do more. And what's interesting is she's currently finishing her PhD in Italy.
Wow. And such a great example also.
For other people in Mongolia. We have a race in Mongolia. Well, we have a race, in many countries, and particularly in New York City. It's called the Hope and Possibility.
Yes.
And in Mongolia, we've had 3,300 people in Ulaanbaatar participate in this race, approximately 100 of whom have disabilities. And the concept of the race is the mainstreaming. In other words, what's happening is people with disabilities are running in a road race, in a marathon, along with people who are not disabled. So you have that, but what's very, very important is the race is being put on by a group of disabled athletes. So it's not necessarily the nice, great, friendly, non-disabled community helping the disabled, but it's the disabled people inviting the community to participate with them. And that changes the whole body English of what's going on.
Yes.
Now, this, very interestingly, was started by actually an Achilles board member. Her name is Tricia Miley.
Yes.
And this is before your time, but back in 1989, she was running in Central Park, and she was accosted, raped, left for dead, and she became known as the Central Park jogger. Yeah. And after having recovered, she joined Achilles, ran the marathon. She joined our board. She was actually our first board chair, founding board chair. And then she wrote a book, and the book was called I'm the Central Park Jogger, A Story of Hope and Possibility. So when her book was coming out, we began our race, and we thought to help the book, it would be nice to name the race after her book, and became the Hope and Possibility Race. And we have it each year in Central Park. The last couple of years, we sold out at 7,500 people.
Wow.
Well, we have several hundred people with disabilities, as well as several thousand people who are not disabled.
Yes. Yeah.
And what we do is we provide extra prizes in different categories for people with disabilities. So instead of just having prizes for people, male, female, and different age groups, we have prizes for amputees, we have prizes for people using push-room wheelchairs, hand cycles, we have prizes for people who are visually impaired.
Yes, it's amazing. And you see at the start the sea of hand cycles, the sea of Achilles Kids also.
Achilles Kids is another program that we have. It's actually our largest program people-wise. We have right now in the United States 12,000 children with disabilities. We're in 21 states. In New York, we have 145 schools. We do it with the Adaptive Physical Education Department. So kids in their schools run laps or whatever, and they track their mileage. And their goal is to run over the period of a school year a total of 26.2 miles, which is a marathon. They receive a great medal, but there are lots of prizes along the way. But the thing that we're doing is we're providing these kids with a goal. We're providing these kids with an opportunity to achieve, and they also have this joy of bonding, in that they're faster than people, they're slower than people, they have something to talk about, and they have a game.
It's fantastic, and it inspires them throughout their life, not only physically and emotionally and socially, mentally, but also educationally. Wouldn't you say the effect of this is incredible?
Yes. Well, we recently did a study. We took 94 kids, and we found that if you are on the autism spectrum and you run, you'll improve physically, which is a no-brainer, but you will also improve cognitively and socially.
Yes.
Okay, and of the different groups of people with disability, children, I think that kids on the spectrum get the most out of it, because what happens is that they are not different physically from the kids who are not on the spectrum, but when they're in shape, they are faster. So they'll be running in races, and they will realize that they're pretty good athletes. And this, in many, many cases, is the one thing that they can do better than their able-bodied peers, and they feel very, very good about it. Now, another part of it is if you're on the autism spectrum, sit here, be still, stand there, and all of a sudden they can get out and they can run, they can use their body, and they love it. And it's one of my favorite programs.
I'm curious to see what you think about where the future lies.
Well, what we've done is we have 5 major programs. So we have the Hope and Possibility Race, we have the Achilles Kids, we have the chapters, we're doing research, and we have another one that's called the Freedom Team. And the Freedom Team is a group, it's really many groups, but it's a group of soldiers with disabilities, and they do a series of marathons. We call it the Marathon Tour, around the United States. And what I'm interested in doing now is increasing the number of chapters that we have. I'm interested in extending the research. So we did this wonderful study with autism. I'm interested in doing another study, the effects of running on people with traumatic brain injuries. We have some very, very good anecdotal information that if you have a TBI and you run, you will improve cognitively. And we're interested in expanding our chapters internationally. Right now we have about 40 international chapters. We have presence, meaning 1 or 2 people in different countries, and in about 70 countries. And I'd like us to build the number of chapters and to expand what we have.
Yes, touch more lives and bring the spirit of achievement and the spirit of the group of Achilles.
Yes.
Even further across the world. So I'm curious, how did you get started, Dick?
This goes back many, many years ago. I was running a business, and I used to speak at the American Management Association, and one of our leaders in his late 30s had a heart attack. And another one of the directors saw me. I was overweight. I limped. No one knew I had an artificial leg. And they suggested that I would be a great candidate for a heart attack. Why not join a YMCA? And I went ahead and I joined, and people were aghast when I was up there in my short pants, not realizing that I only had one leg. And the question was, can you run? So I had paid my dues, and I figured if I said no, I would lose my money. So I said yes. And what I did is I learned how to, like if you had broken a leg and you were trying to cross the street, how do you get across? So you have a hop and a skip. And I tried doing that, and over a period of time, I was able to do a mile. So imagine, you have one leg and you're able to run a mile. Like a mile is 20 blocks. You would take a bus if you were going 20 blocks, and I was really excited and delighted about it. And I have what's called a type A personality.
Yeah.
So the question was, if you could do a mile, could you do 2 miles? And which I did. And then eventually, as we talked about in the book, I joined a group, and we had friends, we had competition, we had goals, and I went from doing 2 miles to a 5-mile race to a half marathon and a marathon. So I got involved in the sport. I was a successful businessman, and as such, the New York Roadrunners Club, which was young at the time, asked me to join their board. And as a board member, became more involved in the sport, ran the 1976 New York City Marathon, continued the run, and I kept coming in dead last. So the issue was, why not find other people out there to run, and I wouldn't keep coming in dead last.
Yes.
And that's how Achilles began. I also discovered that it was a lot more fun. It was more fun to help others than it was to run by myself. And we started coaching other people, and we found people who were obviously faster than I was, and this created a wonderful joy that I was giving a secret. It was sort of like if you think in the olden days of navigators who had these charts, how do you cross from Europe to America, and you had these charts, and I had the chart, and how do you, as a person with a disability, give other people an opportunity to do something that is virtually impossible.
Yes, and making it possible for them, right?
Yes.
And doing it together and sharing in that joy and that achievement I mean, you see so many the athletes coming to Achilles Brooklyn. They bring their medals, athletes and guides sharing their medals of the New York City Marathon. We had a celebration, and the spirit is so amazing.
One of our athletes passed away recently, and at his funeral, he asked to have his New York City Marathon medal put around his neck.
Oh.
And that's how much it meant to him. You know, the kids will run 26 miles and they'll receive a medal, which they will put around their neck, and they may wear it for weeks on end in the school because they are marathoners. They have done something and they're very, very proud of it, and they feel good about it.
Yes, it's incredible. Yeah, it's the spirit of Achilles, and I think from starting like you did with the 8-week program, and so small with you and just a group of others, and to see it speaks volumes that spirit of the group and that spirit of empowering others and inspiring them for achievement has spread all over the world.
We have fun.
Yeah.
I think of spirit as a sixth sense.
Yeah.
Okay, and what we're doing is we're giving people this great, grand thing that I call spirit. You know, it's the kind of thing, you're out there, you've run marathons, you're running a marathon, you've finished mile 26 and you're going on for the last quarter mile, and people are applauding, and there's no feeling that's better than that, and I call that spirit. And what we're doing is we're giving people an opportunity to enjoy to this spirit, the sixth sense.
Yes. Yeah, it's so true. And they keep coming back. You keep going. And you see how it affects the rest of their lives. There's an athlete in particular I'm thinking of that took about 20 minutes to walk to the Prospect Park for the workout. And now she can make it in time for the circle. We circle up and say our names and share something special. And now she's applying for jobs and she's going back to work. She suffered from a stroke, but she discovered Achilles, and now walking and working out and really seeking a lot of wonderful rehabilitation, and did her first race at Hope and Possibility.
What's very interesting for me is that someone goes out and they do a first race, or perhaps they do a marathon, and as they cross the finish line, first thing in their head is, what is my next goal? What is the next thing that I can achieve? And it might be getting married, which has happened.
Yes.
It might be getting a job. It might be going back to school or picking up an additional degree. But what we have done is we have instilled the spirit of achievement.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing to provide others with.
Yes, yes. I commend you for the work you do and the spirit that you yourself, because I really believe that it came from you, love for sport, love for movement, but also really the joy of achieving and spreading that to others.
We were very lucky when we started Achilles. If you had asked, well, what is your main, where are you going with this? The goal was to have a track club, like the Central Park Track Club, the Prospect Park Track Club, just a group of people who would go out there, would work out once or twice a week and do some races. And that was the total vision. And of course, it went beyond that, and it went far beyond that. And it is continuing to grow. We are the largest group of its kind in the world.
Yes.
One of the things that I'm very, very much interested in is research. So we talked about running and autism, but we were actually the first people, we did the first study on running and traumatic brain injuries. It was sort of a correlational study where it was nice, but it really wasn't a great study. I'm looking to do something in terms of getting people, with traumatic brain injuries, test and retest and to prove this very important thing. But there are other areas that are still undiscovered. For example, one of the things that's happening is that if you have a stroke, you go out there and you sometimes learn how to walk, and as you expand your walking, you get better. But there's very little that's being done with the arm. And we've discovered that if you have a stroke and you start using a hand cycle where you go like this here, you have one arm that's pretty good, you have another arm that's not so good, and sometimes it needs to be tied onto the hand cycle. And what you're doing is you are expanding the range of motion, and you are increasing the range of motion in a profound manner.
Wow.
Now, we've also found that this issue works for people who are diagnosed as quadriplegic. So a quadriplegic might have this kind of a range of motion, in many cases, and the quadriplegic coming out and using the hand cycle over a period of time increases the range of motion, and they increase it so profoundly that I have used a term as my term, and it's a joke, but it's real, and we call these quadriplegics faux quads, in that they are technically quadriplegics, but they can do so many things in terms of their range of motion that no one would ever call them quadriplegic. An additional issue, equally important, concerns the concept of happiness of life or satisfaction. And if you come out and you participate with Achilles and you run and you have the group and you have these micro communities that we talked about, you will become a happier person. So we're talking now, particularly with the Freedom Team, the issue of how do you use running to address depression.
Yes.
Okay, this has been done in other ways. Running in general has been shown to improve or to fight depression as well as any medication.
Yes.
Now, if you talk about people with disabilities, I believe the same thing will happen. But again, I think it's very important to study it.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
One of the things that I'm interested in terms of where are we going in the future is to do some research and to sort of prove some of the things that we talk about.
Yeah. As the research is very important, also for funding.
There is money for research, yes.
Yes.
That's correct. Another thing that I'm very proud of is when we started Achilles, if you had a disability like I did, you weren't embarrassed about it necessarily, but you didn't brag about it. You didn't, it wasn't visible. And today, people are very proud. Like one of our athletes, her name is Tammy Duckworth, and she is a senator from Chicago, and she lost her legs in a helicopter crash. She joined Achilles. She's done a number of marathons with us. But when she was elected to Congresswoman, before she became a senator, there was a picture of her in the New York Times. And there she was with other freshman female congressmen, and she was wearing a short skirt, and it was very, very obvious that she had two artificial legs. So rather than trying to hide the disability, she was out there being very proud of it.
Yeah.
And this is I think, a very, very important and something that's really advanced over the last several years.
Yeah, and being proud and being a role model.
In Central Park, for example, people don't notice people with disabilities. Like you'll ask someone, gee, did you see anybody with a disability out there running on Saturday? And someone will think, yeah, I did, or I'm not sure. But there's so many people with disabilities that it isn't even noticed.
Yes.
You see, it's a very, very natural thing for a person with a disability to be out there mainstreaming with the general population. And I feel that we at Achilles, take some of the credit for that.
Yes.
You go out, you're looking for a job, and we have one of our athletes became a policeman in Long Island. He was a double amputee, and he had to pass the same tests as the able-bodied peers. And he was able to run fast enough and to do whatever was necessary to become a policeman. But here's the first, as far as I know, double amputee who is a policeman, and these are great advances.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dick. And I'll see you on the roads with Achilles.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you, Will Sanchez, and to the Manhattan Neighborhood Network for hosting us today. Gotta run.